Okay, we are connecting to a cloud server, Zoom says here. Great, and our attendees are coming in. Um, Jeremy, I'm loving the headphones. They're not quite as rad as your gaming headphones, but
No, I
these are
know.
pretty cool.
I got the gaming headphones right next to me, but I was just podcasting, so this will be even more fun because being the host is not as fun as being the guest. I gotta
I just,
say.
your microphone looks like something like a stormtrooper would have.
Yeah, it's looks fancy, but it's a Rode Podcaster, which if anyone wants to start a podcast, I highly recommend it. And the reason it looks so funky is it's got this. I'm learning all this stuff I never knew, but it's got this fabric thing in front of it that's called a pop filter that prevents P's from sounding bad. That's why it's a pop filter.
Or what is it? Hey, salespeople, how are you?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I guess I was causing ear damage when I was saying, "Hey, salespeople."
Wonderful. Well, it looks like we have a bunch of good people who are joining right now. I see, wonderful. I see Pukar from Security Pal. I see Brees from Stenbird. Who else we got in here? Got Dan Grossberg from Clyde again. Wonderful. Yeah. So, hey, folks, we're just gonna wait a little bit for everybody to filter in. But if you want to go ahead and chat your questions in the chat room, drop your questions here, exclamation point. Just go ahead and drop those in there. We've got some questions that came in ahead of time to dig into, but also if you have some questions that you'd like us to dig into, we'll go ahead and promote you to the panel later and dig into it there. But we can wait a little bit here. So Jeremy, you got any plans for the 4th of July coming up? Gonna go like run around in New York licking handrails and stuff?
Yeah, right. Yeah, licking subway poles. Yeah, no, probably not doing that. These holidays always sneak up on me, and all the more so, I guess, in the era of COVID. So I will probably I have weird hobbies, so I'll probably engage in my weird hobbies. I think some of my weird hobbies, but one of them is archery, which is my newest weird hobby, which I love, and gardening, which is not so weird. And then
That's less weird.
maybe if I've got time, my weirdest hobby is weaving. So I may do some weaving.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. Okay, well let's get the party started here. So so thanks everybody for joining us at for Sales Strategy Office Hours. This is a publication of from Modern Sales. I think a lot of the people who are joining us today are members of Modern Sales Pros. But if you're not, MSP is the nation's largest, probably the world's largest sales operations, sales leadership peer education community. You can check it out at modernsaleshq.com. And so what kind of inspired this is that I end up doing this stuff a lot with sales leaders or like founders or portfolio companies of investors quite a bit, but I kind of would do it one-off. And so helping people debug their biggest questions, et cetera. And so one of the thoughts I had was just potentially do it publicly and help other people kind of get value out of the troubleshooting experience, given the fact that a lot of people have the same problems as everybody else, right? So what we do is we bring an august guest on, like Jeremy here. You'll learn a little bit more about him in a second. I'm sure most of you probably already know who Jeremy is. And then we just tackle 5 to 8 questions together over the hour or so. Try to keep it moving along, not get too deep, just so we can tackle people's questions. So that's the concept. Really quickly, just wanted to introduce Jeremy here. Works at SalesLoft right now, but of course has had a storied career in sales operations, sales strategy. Jeremy, can you introduce yourself to everybody, please?
Yeah, I would say Jeremy does not like to talk about himself in the third person or just talk about himself in general. But yeah, I mean, you pretty much said it. I like you, Pete. I'm a super duper sales nerd and really geek out on all things sales ops and strategy. And in particular, I guess if I've got a particular angle, it's that I don't believe anything until I see the data. So hopefully, a lot of the questions that we that we get today. I can drop data factoids either from our own research, or I'm constantly reading research from other sources and surveys from other sources. So hopefully that sheds some light, data driven insight.
Yeah, for sure. And related to that, if folks haven't read Jeremey and Aaliyah Homason's most recent book, Leading Sales Development, let me just go ahead and drop it in here. Speaking of data, this is a phenomenal read. So Jeremey has published a number of books. I think one is how to give a talk like a TED Talk, which is which is obviously pretty cool. But then a number of specific sales operations, sales development focused books. This is the most recent one. It's absolutely fantastic. It has a ton of wonderful, like, original research from SalesLoft, and I think also from AlphaSense. But then also it's a survey as well of the existing it's a literature survey as well of like existing research, which I think is really important, because like it turns out that things change.
Things do,
right?
Yeah, I think things do change for sure.
Yeah, so it turns out like that thing about like, did you fall on a hippo ate your leg or whatever the hell it is?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like the third touch. Yeah, right. The third touch on a cadence. Turns out that doesn't work
anymore. Yeah, but it did
anymore. Yeah, man.
There was a time when like putting someone's first name in the subject line worked, right? But when it was novel and machines couldn't do that easily. But when machines do things easily and humans detect inauthenticity, that then so goes the best practice becomes a worse practice.
Yeah, well, the funny thing was I went through all of my marketing automation drip sequence follow-ups and changed all the subject lines to one-word subject lines, or two-word subject lines predicated on you guys' research, and you could totally see the open rate change. So anyway, I highly recommend that people check out Leading Sales Development. It's absolutely fantastic. And not only do you get the benefit of Jeremey's brain, you get the benefit of Leah Homason's brain as well. She leads sales development and sales enablement at AlphaSense, which is another fantastic New York-based sales organization. I think Aaliyah is GLG Mafia.
We are both right? We are both GLG Mafia, yeah, and she has now far surpassed me, which is awesome.
Yeah. So so that's Jeremey, and maybe since he doesn't like to talk about himself, we'll give a little bit. So Jeremey previously led sales strategy and operations at CB Insights, and before that at GLG. So Kirsten Lerman Group, massive sales organization in New York marketplace business. So he's been around the block. In addition to publishing books, he's seen a lot of stuff. And of course, SalesLoft has thousands and thousands of customers that really, are in all stages of their maturity. And so you have the benefit of kind of seeing best practices, worst practices, et cetera, across those. So wealth of information from Jeremey here. Killer. So that's Jeremey. A little bit on me, Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Modern Sales, which many of you are familiar with. I also run a software company called Atrium. We make sales performance analysis software that does the analysis for you. The way to kind of think about it is like a robot army of sales operations analysts continuously monitoring all the KPIs and performance KPIs for your SDRs, AEs, AM, CSMs, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty fun stuff. Outside of that, my last software company was a recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide. And that's really where I started learning about sales. My background is actually in product marketing and product management. And then I had to be a first seller and then a sales manager and sales leader at TalentBin. So that was kind of where I started my sales excellence journey there. I wrote a book on sales for founders called Founding Sales that hasn't yet been published. Like, you can't buy a physical copy yet. We have the proofs, so haven't gotten there just yet, but it's available online at foundingsales.com. Wonderful. So I think what we'll do is we'll get started here. I think we saw, trying to see if we have folks.
We've already got a Q&A question, and we also got one in the chat as well. So we got a couple going already.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll start with Shannon Jacobs here, because she submitted a question ahead of time. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're going to grab Shannon here. We're going to promote her to a panelist, and we will get into her question here. Shannon, is Zoom letting you into the panel here? Hey, there she is. Do I have to unmute you? All right, there you are. Hey,
oh my
all right.
God.
You guys,
I feel so
wow.
special.
Howdy, Shannon.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great.
Great.
All right. So yeah, so can you just maybe introduce the organization that you work at, kind of like the parameters of its sales motion, what you do there, and then we'll get into your question here. Sound good?
Sure. So I don't have an organization. I'm currently job hunting, and
Oh, okay.
in the process of job hunting, I've been scouring sales operational positions at 8 different job sites, and I seem to find a theme, which is sales ops positions that are built for unicorns. So they're looking for they're looking for someone who specializes in every aspect of the revenue operations process.
Sure.
Someone who has experience on every software platform, who has experience in everything from sales enablement to you name it. Just they're looking for everything. So, and a lot of the companies don't have sales operations departments yet. So they're looking to establish a sales operations department with one hire. So my question that I sent to Pete was, if you're hired as the first sales operations person at a SaaS company that's been around for a few years, but has never had someone in an operational role before, where do you even begin? There are so many priority areas to cover. And what kind of a timeline would you expect for that person to go through the learning stage, industry, product, processes, personnel, before moving into the planning/building stage? So I guess 2-pronged question.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Wonderful. So Jeremey, do you want to? There's a reason why you're here.
Yeah.
It's to
Fair
dispense
enough.
knowledge. Can you take a first shot at this?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a framework person. So I just think about like, what are the facets of sales operations? The facets are, right, reporting and analytics, compensation management, territory management, and, potentially the deal desk. And then if I had a 5th one, it would be sales enablement, right? Training. So, so I'll start with that framework for one. There's another one, which is, if you can, I'm a big book person, and I was recently recommended a book called The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. And it's a book just about leadership in general and how to get started. So I would say sort of folding these two things together, you're going to come in, you're going to form a 90-day plan. A big part of that 90-day plan, right, is you're going to have 30-day milestones. I would say your first 30 days should be learning. I'm parroting the book here. Your next 30 days is, in that first 30 days, you're not only learning, but you're trying to figure out where the quick wins are. And then you want to start to get those quick wins like delivered by day 60. And then by day 90, kind of your operational rhythm and plan should be kind of going strong. So so now going one level deeper is a big part of the first 90 days philosophy is that you have to align with your boss. So I don't without knowing the priority of the person of the organization you're coming into, like it could be any one of those 5 things. It could be a reporting and analytics issue. It could be a territory issue. It could be a compensation issue, could be a deal processing issue, or could be a sales enablement issue. So I think you got to probe to figure out like what it is they need, and then be really, really clear on what equals success in those areas.
Okay. I just find the theme is that everything is a priority, so it's really hard to focus.
But that's important. Like, I mean, it is a negotiation. I mean, I think people don't realize that sales operations people, just like sales people, need to negotiate their jobs, right? And if you come in and they tell you like these 10 things are a priority, I think you need to push back and say like, here is my project plan for what I'm going to get done in what order, so that you set proper expectations.
Yeah.
And do you do that in the interview part, or do you do that after you get the job and
I think you're going to do it. Frankly, I think you're going to do it a little bit like during the interviewing process, but most of it after you get the job. A lot of times these days when you're interviewing for a job, they want you to put together, they actually want you to put together the plan. So, I mean, I've had when I joined SalesLoft, when I joined CB Insights, when I joined GLG, like all of those examples. I joined Gartner as a child. I was like 22 years old, so I did not go through that process. But in all those jobs, like part of my job was actually to put together a very high level strategic plan. And it wasn't go off and do that in a vacuum. It was, I got to work with, you know, the CRO or CEO to figure that out. So I figured out what their priorities were. So I think you could do it on both sides.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I dropped a couple of those things into the chat room there. So Jeremy's, so the first 90 days, and then Jeremy's write-up on it. Jeremy does a bunch of write-ups on the books that he reads on his blog at Selling Sherpa. I think, so a couple of things there. I think one thing I might note is knowing what is important in an organization kind of relies on like where the organization is at, what are the things that they're already good at, and where there are deficits. And so I think it's not dissimilar to like a really good discovery call, right? Where you're coming in and asking, okay, what are the issues? What are the priorities? Like where's the business pain? And what are the consequences associated with us not solving that? So then you would say, okay, well, how do I maybe go about that? I'm going to chat into the room here. This is a sales maturity health checklist that I use when I talk to a lot of organizations, and it just kind of helps you understand kind of like what stage an organization is at, and see where there are undershoots. And then this right here is a sales operational maturity model that we publish at Atrium that kind of just has like, these are maybe the things that you should be, this is a level of maturity you should be at with respect to your analytics, for instance, or your sales engagement software, or your CRM strategy, or your like data strategy for your CRM strategy, or your comp approach and things like that. And so you can kind of, and obviously it's not hard and fast rules, but you can kind of see like, oh, wow, we're a 40-person sales organization and we're spending this amount of time doing comp per month, and we're on a monthly cadence, and we're spending this amount of time doing comp out of Excel documents. Okay, so maybe that's the thing that we like maybe focus on first. Or, oh, okay, we're a 50-person sales organization and we have no idea how many like customer-facing meetings or new opportunities people are engaging with. Okay, well, maybe it sounds like we need to get our analytics house in order first, because that's the biggest pain point. So I think coming in and saying, what are the things that are maybe the biggest fires that are burning is an important thing to do. And then I think to your comment about like everything's a priority. Well, if everything's a priority, then like nothing's a priority, and you're not going to get anything done. And so one of the things, Jeremy kind of touched on this, one of the things I like to, one of the frameworks I like to, metaphorical frameworks I like to encourage sales operations people to use is to think of themselves as like a product manager of the sales organization. And so there's going to be bugs, there's going to be features that you want to resolve, features that you want to build, but there's only you, or maybe there's you plus somebody else. And so if you just like bucket those like if you collect the bugs and features, and then you rank them with respect to how big of a pain in the ass they are right now, the business deficit, and then you put level of effort required to solve them next to them, then we can see, okay, well, this is how much I can do with little old me in what time frame. And if you want to do more of this, then we need more than little old me. Or alternatively, then these are the things that we can do. And so that's just, it's not dissimilar to a sprint planning process that you would do in a software organization. Then like it's not dissimilar from that. And then that way you can set those parameters and then get onto like a sprint schedule where this is what we're going to work on for the next month, the next 2 months, and we're going to check in every 2 weeks on it, or what have you. So that would be the thing. And then the other thing that you kind of commented on that I wanted to touch on is you were talking about how a lot of organizations are looking for unicorns. I think by virtue of the fact that sales operations, and it's like sexier, longer name brother revenue operations, are kind of like newer things. And I think a lot of people just kind of like throw the kitchen sink in there. So just showing up and saying like, hey, this is like having a prescriptive point of view will probably be valuable to you as you're job seeking. Jeremy, did you have something you wanted to?
No, right on. Yeah. In fact, at one point, in the context of revenue operations, about, I don't know, 6 months or a year ago, we had gotten big enough that we had enough people, cooks in the kitchen on this, but we actually put together a role clarity document where we took all those categories of sales operations and enumerated all the sub responsibilities and then figured out who to assign it out to. So if you share like show notes or something like that, Pete, I would flash the one I have, but it has all the SalesLoft like people names in there. So I don't want to kind of reveal those names, but I'm happy to share the template with all the fields.
Yeah, I'll just note that down, because I note down all the materials that get shared. So that's essentially just like, it's like a RASCI model, like a responsibility
exactly what it is.
matrix. Okay, yeah. A RASCI model for sales ops. All right, got it down. Cool. Shannon, we good?
Thank you.
Okay, radical. Thank you very much for showing up and asking the thoughtful question. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Okie dokie. Great. So let's go to the next question here. We had one from Vishal from Stiff Science here. So I'm going to go ahead and promote him to a panelist here. And it looks like we've got some other questions that are coming in. So I'm just going to take stock of those while Vishal shows up here. Actually, didn't we have you last week?
Pete, I love these.
If you were here last week, you're not allowed back.
But
like, let's kick him off, Pete.
That's okay. No worries.
No, Jeremy, I think Jeremy was super pumped on your question anyway. So I guess this is a new feature requirement for office hours. Is like I have to rate limit participation necessarily. But you snuck in here. You snuck in before I.
His question's awesome, though. His question's awesome.
Before I identified your this bug. Okay, so Vishal, can you do me a favor? Can just for everybody's benefit, can you describe the size of your sales organization, kind of what the sales motion looks like, what you do there, then we can pop into your question, pretty please.
Sure thing. So I work at SIFT, machine learning for online fraud detection and digital trust and safety. Typical ACVs between 40 and 50K. Sales manager of a mid-market SMB team. So the question I had was in many ways designed to overcome my own blind spots, which was from Jeremy's vantage point, his data, his literature study, what differentiates a successful sales manager versus those that we don't talk about anymore?
Mm-hmm. That's a very polite way to put it.
That took me a second. I love that.
That's you used to be a rep. I see that. Yeah.
The dearly departed.
Yeah. Wonderful. So Jeremy, I'm sure you have lots of perspectives on this, both from sales development management and also sales AE management standpoint. What would you say?
Yeah, I definitely geeked out when I saw this question. And I'll as I probably will answer with almost every question, I'll refer you to books, but then I'll summarize as well. So the best books that exist on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, on sales management, I think the single best one is actually the Sales Manager Survival Guide by David Brock. That one, you just go into it knowing you're going to read a textbook, but it is so comprehensive and it's flawless. The much more readable book, it's actually a pair of books by the same authors, Jason Jordan and Michelle Venezza, I think is how you pronounce her last name, is the sales manager. Cracking the Sales Management Code. That's it.
Yeah.
And then Cracking the Sales Management Code, which is awesome. And then Crushing Quota, which is the follow-on. So that pair is great. So, but and then there's the third piece. So those are the books you should read if you care about this and like to read. Then I did two other things in prep for this. One is I posted on LinkedIn this question for folks about like for their managers, what do they value? And then I read a great Gartner study and a great study by a company I think called SOAR Consulting. And what I observed is like when people answered that question, they were answering it in two ways. One is they were answering it in terms of like who the manager is, what are their traits or behaviors or skills,
right?
And then the second way they answered it is in terms of what they spend their time on.
Right.
And I could probably go on at length on this, but I'll give you the high level. So in terms of who they are, I don't think there's anything earth shattering there, right? It's stuff like they're collaborative, they're customer focused.
Sure.
You know, they set high expectations for their reps, so they challenge them. They're conscientious. Like, I think the traits are just good traits of good employees and good managers and good workers. Where I think the more interesting thing exists is what they spend their time on.
Yes.
And that was really where the Gartner study went. And the Gartner study basically showed that managers, and maybe this is obvious, but basically managers who spend their time more on like external deal related stuff are much better than managers who basically sit in cross-functional work groups or spend a lot of time on analytics and reporting and forecasting. So like short answer is, and maybe it's obvious, is like help your reps on their stuff. Pete, I might turn part of this question to you though, which is some of the people who talked about like on the LinkedIn thread, they were separating like deal coaching from directly engaging in deals. I'm curious on your perspective on what should managers be doing, or is it an and or is it an or? Where should the focus be?
I obviously, given the fact that I run a performance analysis software company, I think about things a lot of times in like jobs to be done, time allocation associated therewith, because, you know, like there's only 40, 50, 60 hours in a week. So how are you going to spend your time doing that? How can you lever yourself up? Can you spend your time on the things that are like the highest leverage? And so one thing I wanted to note here is I'm going to just chat into the room here a link from my book on the chapter from sales management. So just like sales management basics, because obviously Jeremey gave some great like books, but this is just a chapter from founding sales on kind of like early stage sales management basics. And I think that I'm not surprised about what you're talking about. Like, are you spending your time on analytics, but then never gets actioned? Or are you spending your time like getting into fights with marketing or like managing up to your VP of sales, or, you know, managing, you know, like what have you, like you're going out with customer success or whatever. I guess nobody's going out right now. And I think the important thing here is that the things that managers are like most successful managers do is they make their reps better. And so and then there's like low leverage ways of doing that, and there's high leverage ways of doing that. The low leverage way of doing that is to just like be a super rep and be on their calls and kind of like, all right, here, get out of my way. I'm going to close this.
You might get the deals done, but you're not helping your team, and you can only scale so far.
Yeah, it's low leverage, right?
Yeah.
Because ideally what we should be doing is our reps should be having, you know, 10 to 15 meetings a week. You can't be on all those meetings, right? So what I would say is that, so that doesn't mean don't be like in customer facing meetings, but you're in customer facing meetings for the purposes of diagnosing issues, maybe participating in order to like kick save something. Like I do this with my reps a lot. I'll be on a Zoom call with them and I'll just kind of be chatting them stuff, right? Like, hey, you know, did you think about like driving in this direction right here? Or did you hear that, right? Now, obviously that's time intensive, and potentially you could do that in a higher leverage fashion by listening to chorus calls or Zoom calls or what have you. But I think the problem associated with that is that like a lot of people just don't schedule the time to do that, and then you kind of like miss the opportunity to like kick save something, or you just kind of act as like, oh wow, you totally bungled that objection handle there. Too bad that deal's dead. Womp womp, right? So I think there's like unfortunately a little bit of a trade-off there. But like I think if you're going to participate live in calls, then what you should be doing is looking at it from the standpoint of making this person better going forward, such that eventually what you can do is like you can not be on their calls at all. And so I think that that's you know, an important way to think about it. It's like, yeah, I can participate, I can engage in lower leverage things, but with the intention of making reps better. And then there's high leverage things that you spend your time doing, like enabling reps. Like if you hear objections multiple times, then why don't we make a slide about that handles the objection?
Yeah.
Or like,
absolutely.
why don't we make a guru card about that? That like those are examples of like tool. So one of the things that I tell my team all the time is like the difference between humans and monkeys is that humans we make tools, And so like making tools, for instance, is a high leverage thing. Teaching people and making sure that they ingest the learnings and get better, that's a high leverage thing, because essentially like you don't have to do the job for them again. It's a teach a man a fish sort of situation. The other thing that's high leverage is things like analytics. So like looking on a Monday morning or on a Sunday afternoon, looking across your team and seeing like where there are potential issues. And then it's not sufficient to then just be like, I see this issue. Great, my job is done. But now, of course, you have to action it.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I would add, I mean, on the sales manager side, though, also using the data is I think it's low leverage for the manager to like build dashboards and reports. They should either leverage a tool like, we use Atrium or, whatever other tools people use. So they should, and the sales ops team should configure. I feel like the sales ops team should configure that for them. And ditto on the training side, the Gartner study basically showed that yes, training reps is a high leverage activity for managers, but developing the training or like writing the guru card is a low leverage activity that should go to sales enablement.
And what I would say there is that this is very contingent on the maturity of the organization and what resources are available, right? So like when I say that, I'm thinking about an organization, like Vishal, how big is SIFT right now?
180 people.
Okay, so you're like fairly large. You might have a sales enablement function or sales operations function or what have you. But so what in Jeremy's case, what he's pointing out is like, yes, the job of we need to use analytics in order to understand what the specific area of like intervention is on a rep by rep basis. If you have a sales operations function, well, as a manager, like tinkering around and like goofing around in Salesforce making reporting is probably not the highest leverage thing to do. Now, if you're a smaller organization and you don't have that and you literally have like no analytics, then like maybe putting in place, and this kind of goes to Shannon's point, putting in place some analytics could be very helpful there. If you don't have a sales deck, or you have like an 8-slide sales deck and there's no there's no repository of objection handle stuff, well, maybe that's your job to get that done. Or alternatively, if sales enablement isn't getting that done and you're hearing these things come up again and again, well, it might be time for you to get involved there, because the alternative is for your reps to continue to get their ass kicked on these objections that are coming up or what have you. Someone was asking about where the Gartner study lives.
Yeah, I'll paste the title. Gartner, I used to work there. I worked there for 16 years. And if I actually share the document, they will not be happy is the best way to put it.
Oh, I see. Yes, that's right. It is a what is that called? Not a credential, but an entitled. It is an entitled document.
Does that make me entitled? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely entitled. Okay, wonderful. So Vishal, did I give you some good pointers?
It did. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay, wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and change your role to an attendee here. And then let's go to the next question here. So I think Pukar had an interesting question here. Let me go ahead and find it here. Here, I'm going to go ahead and promote Pukar. And,
Oh, I got to turn my video on. Hey there.
We gotcha. Hey, Pukar, good to see you.
Welcome to Car Talk.
Welcome to Sales Geek Talk.
Yeah, so my car is making a weird noise. It's going like, no, I'm just kidding.
Is it coming from the front or
my CRM sounds weird. It's belching smoke. Oh, okay. Well, Salesforce normally belches smoke, so that's okay. So Pukar, can you share with everybody what it is you do, size of your sales organization, and then your question?
Yeah, so I am the account executive and founder at SecurityPal. Essentially, SecurityPal, we work with like Atrium, Airtable, Figma to help automate the security review and compliance stage in the sales process and make it go much faster. So deals can close and everyone's happy. My question was really around, Jeremy, like your background is so non-traditional from most other people in sales. And just given like a lot of the thought leadership and just a lot of the writings that you've done, I'm really curious to hear about, your engineering background, and curious to hear from your perspective about why you think there's like a general aversion from traditionally technical people to enter the world of sales. What have you seen in like your career so far? What are the trends that you're seeing today? Do you feel like it's changing? Do you feel like that change is happening fast enough? I know SalesLoft has kind of like led the charge on trying to make it more rigorous, make it more intellectually, and instrumenting more metrics and all these other things. But like, I'm curious to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, I'll caveat it by saying, well, first, thank you, but it's also, yeah, my perspective, and I do have a super weird path. At a high level, for if what he's describing is basically most people will go like whatever SDR, AE, manager, and then they'll work their way from SMB to mid market to enterprise and whatever. So like I became a CRO before I ever sold anything, which makes me a total fraud. But my career management approach was basically add a word, drop a word. So I was a semiconductor engineer. I became a semiconductor analyst. Dropped the analyst, added product development. Dropped the development part, added management. Dropped the management, product marketing. Dropped the product part, corporate marketing. Dropped the corporate part, added sales. So sales and marketing. So that was like the CRO thing. And then I dropped the marketing piece and added operations and strategy. So it's like it was kind of a weird thing, but it was basically I was always building on something I learned and going from there. To your like more specific question, like why did I make those progressions specifically? It was because I felt as though the marketing world was going through a transformation a decade ago from like the creative branding side. And I could barely draw a stick figure. So that's not my world, over to the like analytical demand gen ROI side. So that was why I made that move, was I thought that I could bring to bear my geeky like CS and math abilities there. And that's absolutely what attracted me to sales. I think to your point, I think marketing transformed analytically faster than sales has been transforming. Much faster. Like it still feels like we're in the very early innings on that one. I'll turn it to you, Pete. Like, why do you think that is? Why do you think sales has been so much slower to transform?
Well, I think I loved your description there, Jeremy, because one of the things that Richard Scrow, who's the general manager of MSP, talks about, it's like the transition from Mad Men to Math Men. And so I think I'll touch on what you just asked, Jeremy, and then Pukar will kind of talk about.
We got to make it like mad people to math people, at least.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yes. So I think. So Nate Silver, you guys might be familiar with Nate Silver. He writes at 538. He's like a pollster and a statistician. He also does a bunch of sports writing as well. And so this is really great blog post called like Rich Data, Poor Data. And what it talks about, and it's viewed in through the lens of sports analytics. And so essentially the different types of sports have progressed with respect to their analytics at different paces, predicated on the data availability. And so one good example of this, I'm sure everyone's familiar with like Moneyball, right? Like the book and the movie and what have you. And so the reason why baseball lent itself to analytics so much better than like football and soccer and hockey and so on and so forth is because the game is slow enough that you can manually record what happened in the game. And then that's been the case for like 100 years. And so what ends up happening is you have all this historical data on baseball games going back forever, and it's in a format that can be interrogated, and you can like ask questions of it and like do statistical analysis on and so on and so forth. So I think in general, one, that happened in marketing way sooner, because if you think about it, like there's ad serves and clicks and all this different stuff, and this is why businesses like Segment and mParticle and what have you are blowing up, because you got to store all that information. And then so really what ends up happening is, because that stuff showed up earlier, you could do analysis on it, that then made it such that people who actually had those muscles could do things there and could belong there. And then there's actually there's a circular cycle there where, by virtue of the fact that that information exists, you can now do that analysis on it. That then means that like maybe we're going to collect more data and so on and so forth. So I think that you saw that in marketing, and so that's only starting kind of now to take off in sales land, because if you think about the data that we collect historically with the CRM, it was like opportunity level data, what have you. Whereas like now we collect email data and call data and like meeting data, and like, yeah, there's opportunity data, but like, so all of that is flowing into the CRM now, whereas maybe like 10 years ago, it really wasn't. And so now what we've got, and then this kind of is tied to the growth of sales operations. As I like to say that like sales operations is kind of like a numerical prosthesis to the sales organization. You kind of like take it, like you like bolt a left brain onto the sales organization. So I think that that's happening there. And so I think what we're seeing this already, where more people like Jeremey, and you see this a lot when you look at sales operations people, and also sales operations people who then go into sales leadership, and they're, as we like to say, like they're not afraid of Excel. We have more sales managers and more sales leaders who are not afraid of Excel. I think the other thing I wanted to touch on really quickly with you, Pukhar, is you said, you know, why has there been this historical like resistance to technical people entering the world of sales? I think there's that circularity to it as well, where as Jeremey was kind of noting, like, well, if the only people who could have success in marketing were people who were like creatives or what have you, then maybe Jeremey didn't feel that there was a place for him. I think by virtue of the fact that now people have to be analytical and like process oriented and what have you in sales, that opens the door to folks. I think the other thing too is that historically there hasn't been as much information available about like how selling actually works. And like,
yeah.
and breaking it down as a process. And I think the publication and like the demystification of that has been very helpful. Conveniently, there's people like Jeremey writing about this stuff. And so I think that that's been something that has helped folks kind of break down the barrier of like, oh yeah, sales, it's that like, I'm not a people person. That's something that I should be afraid of. It's like this like spooky art. And I think that's getting broken down by virtue of the fact that there's like more information available there.
Yeah.
Jeremey, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to add to you. I mean, yes, I totally agree. I think it is like the data, you had more perfect data in marketing, and data remains relatively imperfect in sales. I think the other piece is, we were talking about this today, is how do you forecast a transactional business a quarter out? Like that data doesn't even exist at all. You have to shift over to using a production-based model as opposed to a pipeline-based model, which is a little mystical for people. And then the third thing I'd add is to your point about like not a lot of like science people in or STEM people, science, technology, engineering, mathematics people in sales. I mean, right, is the short-term earning potential for STEM graduates was so much higher in other disciplines, right? Like
Sure.
You come in as an SDR, like, yeah, you can get to be an enterprise rep making $600,000 after a bunch of years if you succeed, but you got to do like a really, really hard job for a while. And therefore you just don't see a lot of STEM people. We did a study though, where we looked at everybody who was ever an SDR at Salesforce. There was about 2,000 of them in the US. And we coded up the biographical data on them. And if you had a STEM degree, which is extremely rare, then you're so much more likely to be successful in sales. So they just don't exist because of other job opportunities.
That's right. Yeah, that's interesting. There's like a filtration there. Now, I think what I have seen though is people like jumping across, and that's actually where founding sales came from. Because my background's in product market. Like I call myself a commercial storyteller, right? That's why I just like create slides and like materials and what have you. And so going from being like a product marketer or a product manager or a sales engineer or a solutions consultant, a customer success person, though, like kind of going across, that's where I think there historically has been people who could get into sales, who maybe were a little bit more process oriented or like mathematically orientated. And then there was like a barrier there because of like less understanding. And so I see like there's one of our customers, their head of sales. She was a customer success person at this like math software company, and then she was a statistician at that math, and then she became an account executive at that math software company, and now she's like the VP of sales, and she has like 8 managers under her and like 100 reps under.
Awesome.
100 that. Yeah, but I think it's like she kind of like got past the filter, but she's like a killer. And so you kind of look at that and you're like, okay, wonderful. So like if you can facilitate that process a little bit better, you might have you might have more people making that jump, and you actually might have higher quality sales leaders as well. Because I think kind of the implication of Pukar's question is like, maybe the existing sales leadership bench, if you will, is maybe not as developed as it could be, by virtue of the fact that like the folks there maybe are kind of missing some of those muscles. Wonderful. Pukar, did we handle your question?
Oh yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for sharing your thoughts here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Great to meet you.
Okay, cool. So I think we have time for one more question here. And
it's a blast, by the way. I love this.
Yeah, that's fun. It like definitely tickles your brain. Makes you think. Let's go. I think Jonathan Sroka here had a really cool question. Oh, he's talking about science and art of sales. This is a must. This is a must ask for Jeremy here. So Jonathan, we're gonna promote you here. Okay.
Hello.
Hey,
Howdy.
there's Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan, can you introduce yourself, your company, what you work on there, and then ask your question?
Sure. Jonathan Soroka here in lovely Massachusetts on a Friday, just reminding you guys of the day of the week because we all forget that.
Friday afternoon, by the way, right?
It's Groundhog's Day, right? Just like it was yesterday.
It is. It is. Don't get in the rabbit hole of why didn't you just try to stay up, because that'll take you 12 hours. So currently advising for a couple companies, OTG, Open Rounds, and Gradmore. In market for the right full-time opportunity. The world has kind of shifted me around on focus from marketing SaaS to CSR and education, but just kind of bouncing off of engineers and others getting into sales, and kind of looking at the dynamic of our world shifting around. Just kind of brought up the art and science of sales, the inclusion of more data, the inclusion of more automated processes, the kind of evolution of the thinking that SaaS technology can just be dropped into organizations in 2 minutes over the last decade, and kind of where we're at and how we can best move forward. I think there's a lot of amazing things that are being brought into the process, but how do we reinvent and take these organizations forward now that we're looking at data, now that we're bringing in different types? How do we open the doors for everybody and optimize on this?
Got it. So I think what you had here was, you said that sales seems to become a third rail. When it works, it's left untouched. When it doesn't, it gets ripped out and something totally different is tried. How do we maybe avoid those big rip outs?
Yeah, so if three lone wolves are selling 200% of quota, they don't get any asks to let's get in and tweak the system and optimize and put in processes and do training. And if everything's not working, everybody just gets blown out, and they bring in a new crew to try it. They don't really go through the motions of improving the process.
Sure.
Improving how we do this.
Right. So like iterative improvement as opposed to like forklift. Jeremy, do you have comments on that?
I got some thoughts. I mean, for starters, I think this is I'm glad you surfaced this one, because it's a real issue. It's in a smaller company, right? You can hire a few just killer closers, and they're often people that were killer closers from somewhere else. So your likelihood of success is extremely high. Once you get into larger companies and once you begin to scale, and I'll just reference my experience at Gartner, where we went from like, I don't know, when I joined 500 sellers to, when I left, probably 3,000 to 4,000 sellers. When you're at that scale, you need to be able to like hire consistent talent, but you cannot build a business on superstars. And I think one of the other pieces in subtext of your question is like this whole statistic around, the average CRO tenure is around 2 years. I think it's a little even less than that, right? 22 months, 21, 22 months. And what's happening there? My observation of that, having seen progressions of CROs in places that I've worked at, is I'll put my strategy hat on, right? Which is any change in any system is built of people, process, and technology. And what I've tended to see is this whiplash, right? That you hire a CRO who's like incredible people-centric and able to hire and coach and whatever, and instill that discipline. And then you get as much juice out of that. And then it's like you hit a wall, and then they go fire that person and they go hire a person because process was lacking, right? And they like run the process thing, and then they do the technology thing, and they go in cycles. So I think the CEROs that I've seen that have lasted are the ones who are really thinking about all three pillars there, right? Like,
Right.
and have an approach to all three of those things, and they really are interlocking. So, there's most certainly art and science in both of those things. The art is very heavily, I think, on the people side, and I think the science piece is very heavily on the process and technology side. I'll just like by one example, right? We have a new CRO as of, I guess he's about 30 days in now. And one of the great disciplines he's brought is like, we had a bit of a hard time in the past getting like sales methodology to stick consistently across the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been super adamant about making sure that we use a methodology consistently. We're using ICED, which is, it's basically MEDIC in disguise. It's a more compact version of MEDIC, but it does all the MEDIC stuff. So it's identify pain, champion, economic buyer, and decision, all things decision, decision process criteria, and so on. So, we are now teaching our sales managers to become like really, really, really great at deal inspection in a way that we hadn't before, and lacking those sorts of methodologies, things do fall off the rails, and then you rip stuff out. So again, just to conclude, I just think to be successful, you need like don't lose focus on any one of those three pillars.
Right.
Yeah. I think the thing I might comment on there, and I think, Jonathan, you work with more like early stage companies,
Yes.
I want to say.
Yep.
Yeah. So Jeremy and I are kind of fun. Jeremy's like, I'm kind of like mini micro, like that's where I live, is in super early stage sales, like founder-led selling. That's where my writing is and my speaking is. I feel that a lot of the time where the issues that you're describing come from of like, oh, this isn't working, let's tear it all out and like bring a whole new thing in. It's one
flavor
of the things.
Of the quarter, I call it.
You say flavor of the quarter? Yeah. Like, I think where a lot of that comes from is just like a misunderstanding of like how the sales motion of an organization actually works. What I mean by that is there's this like concept of cargo culting, where like back in World War II, you had all these like bombers, bomber bases in the Pacific, and so the natives there had like never, they were not familiar with bombers, and moreover they like all of a sudden all these like wonderful things like Coca-Cola and like chocolate and like canned food started showing up, and then the war ended and all the bombers went away, thankfully. And then all of a sudden, like, but unfortunately, all the chocolate went away and the Coca-Cola went away and like the canned food went away. And so the natives were they're like, okay, well, what are we going to do about this? Well, I know what we should do. We should make some bombers out of trees and out of like coconut fronds and what have you. You look this up on Wikipedia around cargo cults, and essentially what it's doing is it's an example of like misunderstanding like the cause for the effect. And so you get this happening a lot in sales organizations where they're like, shit, man, like, I don't know how this thing works, but I know that this person did this thing at like, at MongoDB or at, at Salesforce or SuccessFactors or whatever. And so like, and he's got amazing hair. So like, I gotta, and so I'm going to bring him in here. And like fully expecting that like that will come along with it. Like, well, the chocolate will come, right? Yep. And so I think what that misunderstands is like what the process is to actually like close business and what the actual repeatable sales motion is. So what you end up having there is, I think you have that happening a lot in organizations where there isn't a methodical understanding of like what their ICP is, what the personas are within that ICP, what the decision, like what the logic gates are and the decision tree is in the sales motion. Because if it's just kind of like this composite mess of like, yeah, we just closed deals, man. Then I think what if it's a black box where you don't understand what's going on inside of it, it's very difficult to say, oh, I see, it's that part right there. Like our conversion rate from that to that is problematic. Or, oh, I know what your problem is, rep. You keep interacting with the wrong persona in that organization. But in order to diagnose that rep is interacting with the wrong persona in that organization, you need to know what the right personas ought to be. And so the only way you can do that is by actually understanding what the decomposed sales motion is. And so I think when you get this behavior of like ripping out and shoving in, it's essentially like, well, that didn't work here. Let's like shove a whole nother thing in here versus like, okay, starting from the beginning, how are we supposed to sell this? Who gives this, like, who cares about this, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, you know, that would be like, oftentimes I think when you're seeing that behavior, like pulling something out and sticking back in, it's like, whoa, pump the brakes. Like, let's go back up the, I dropped the deck that I deliver a lot into the chat room. Let's go back up the maturity curve and actually understand, like, do we know the problem that we're solving? Do we know the people that care about it? Do we know that what the KPIs are that we improve? Do we know the people that we need to talk to in order to prove this, et cetera? Because then you can start like diagnosing shortfalls in there.
I agree 100%. If we can just get Pete to release that Gartner report that says that enterprise sales takes about 16.5 months and put that with that strategy, then I think we can effectively talk to the management team.
16.5 months, man. I'm glad that I sell to the mid-market.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. See you.
Have a good weekend.
Okay. I think we have time for maybe one last question here. Actually, this is kind of a fun one here. So Abdul here, let's see if he's still in here. All right, he's got a question about sales operations in non-software sales here. Abdul, did you hear?
If it's alphabetical up here, he may be gone.
Oh, I think he may have just started. Oh well. Actually, so Ryan has a good question here about early stage. So here, let's go ahead and pull Ryan up here. Hey, Ryan. You had a good to see you. You had a question about consulting.
Yeah.
In SalesLoft. Maybe you can introduce yourself to folks really quickly, and then we can get into that question.
Sure. Ryan Chisholm, Director of Sales at an IoT startup, SensorUp. So we're a company of 20 people, sales team. We've got 3 people in sales and then 4 others in management help out when the opportunities mature. And so as the first sales hire brought in, you know, this is a piggyback onto the sales ops question. As the first sales hire brought in, you're prioritizing your time and trying to, you know, let the right things burn as
Right.
Right. And so I'm trying to figure out, you know, how much or should I be using consulting in sales ops? Is there things, because stuff breaks, right? Like I think of our LinkedIn sync over to Salesforce, you know, creating new fields in Salesforce that also sync with Outreach or SalesLoft, you know, and trying to instrument reporting that the board wants and related to, you know, the next fundraise. Some of these things can be quite consuming, and I've already heard on the call, you know, hey, you should get a sales ops person, you know, to do this stuff. And so we're not hiring somebody full-time to do it, but I'm wondering if there's like a consulting pitch. Right.
So essentially, like, is there an opportunity for using consulting in an early stage organization in order to help contend with some of these requirements? Is that right?
Exactly.
Got it. Jeremy, do you have a point of view on this?
If you're, because we don't have a lot of time. I mean, if you're small, I think, yeah, you do sales ops as a service. And I know there's some great companies out there like Fullcast, I think, is in that space. Go Nimbly, I think, is in that space. Pete, you probably know some other ones. Maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Shannon about what are the things, like what are the requests? How important are they to the business? If they're important to the business, like, can we quantify their importance to the business and quantify the level of effort that's required for them? If so, we can decide if we want to put our own human resources against it. If our human resources aren't able to do that because we don't have the skill profile, because we haven't hired for it full time, that's fine. If it's important, then we can, you know, can tap consulting. So yeah, some good examples there would be Go Nimbly is a good one. They're kind of bigger. You know, Kicksaw, there's just a bunch of these folks that are in the modern sales community. I know All Cloud is somebody who as is providing a very specific sales operations as a service offering where you get a certain number of hours. And I think that the reason why this is kind of important to have in your back, or it can be very helpful to have in your back pocket, is because, as you point out, things break. And if something breaks and you're like, oh man, I no longer can report on XYZ, but I don't know how that connector happens. Well, you probably want to jump on that very quickly, versus the notion of, oh, I want to put together reporting in order to present something to the board or whatever. Well, that's probably something that's like not urgent. It's like the Eisenhower matrix, right? Like important versus urgent. So if you have stuff that is like urgent and important, and you don't have the acumen, and that's coming up frequently, and you don't have the acumen to resolve that, then yeah, probably having like a recurring solution to that in the form of a consultant in your back pocket can be super helpful. Because if you think about and then if then leadership feedback or like finance feedback on that is, well, I don't know about that if we have budget for it. It's like, okay, well then here are now you're just internally selling. Well, here are the pain points associated with that. Here are like, the negative repercussions associated with this. And like, here's the ideal state if I had the capacity to resolve this. So, that seems like a good trade. Give me $500 a month or what have you. Does that answer your question, Ryan?
Yeah, no, that's good. Thanks, guys. These sessions are great.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks for coming. Well, Jer, I think we're out of time.
Thank you. Yeah, there were a bunch of great ones, so we'll have to do it again.
Womp, womp, womp. Yeah, so for everyone who stuck around, thank you so much. This is going to be downloaded, put up on YouTube later. I'll distribute it out to everybody else. Thank you, everybody, for the really great questions. Super fantastic. So for folks who are not members of Modern Sales yet, go ahead and check that out at modernsaleshq.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube, just go ahead and subscribe, and because we do these every week. And in fact, next week, who do we have next week? I think we have Don Otvos next week coming, showing up. So Don Otvos from Lean Data is he going to be our next week person? Yes, we are. So like on the 2nd, next Thursday, since Friday is 4th of July celebrated, we're gonna have Don Otvos from Lean Data, VP of Revenue Ops from Lean Data. So come join us then and submit your questions ahead of time. So thanks everybody for showing up, and thanks Jeremy for sharing all your knowledge. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete.
See ya.